replying to Netanyahu. The argument I am referencing suggests that the persistent cycle of conflict involving groups like Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, PA, stems from a deeper ideological root, political Islam, specifically the doctrine of jihad as derived from the Quran. Let's unpack this perspective systematically, addressing its claims, implications, and potential counterpoints, while keeping the response grounded and comprehensive. Core claim: ideology as the driver of conflict. The assertion is that groups like #Hamas or the PA are not the root cause of violence but symptoms of a broader ideology, political Islam, which the speaker ties to the Quran's teachings on jihad. Political Islam, in this context, refers to the use of Islamic principles to organize political, social, and military structures, often with an emphasis on establishing Islamic governance, e.g., a caliphate, and resisting non-Muslim influence. Jihad, as invoked here, is interpreted as a call to struggle or fight against non-Muslims, particularly in the context of conquest or supremacy. The argument posits that removing specific groups, Hamas, PA, or others, is futile because the ideology will spawn new actors. This is likened to a hydra: cut off one head, and another grows back. The playbook, the Quran, per the speaker, must be addressed to break the cycle. Breaking down the ideology. 1. Political Islam *. This term encompasses movements that seek to align governance with Islamic law, Sharia. Groups like Hamas, an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, explicitly tie their resistance to Israel to a broader Islamic framework, citing religious duty. Religious duty. Their charters and rhetoric often invoke Quranic verses to justify armed struggle. For example, Hamas's 1988 charter references Islamic principles to frame its fight against Israel as a religious obligation, not merely a nationalist one. 2. Jihad in the Quran *. The concept of jihad appears in the Quran in various contexts, ranging from internal spiritual struggle, greater jihad, to defensive or offensive warfare, lesser jihad. Critics, like the speaker, focus on verses like Surah Al-Tawbah 9:29, which calls for fighting those who do not believe in Allah until they pay tribute, or Surah Al-Anfal 8:39, which urges fighting until religion is all for Allah. These are interpreted by some as mandates for conquest or supremacy. However, interpretations vary widely. Many Muslims argue these verses are context-specific, tied to 7th century Arabia's tribal conflicts, and not universal commands. 3. The Quran as a military manual ***. The speaker's framing of the Quran as a military manual of conquest and supremacy is a provocative characterization. It suggests the text inherently promotes violence and domination. This view aligns with critiques from figures like Robert Spencer or Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who argue that Islamic texts provide a blueprint for militancy. However, this overlooks the diversity of Islamic scholarship, where scholars like Yusuf al-Qaradawi or mainstream Sunni jurists emphasize defensive jihad or contextual readings over universal aggression. Implications of the argument. If the ideology of political Islam, rooted in the Quran, is the primary driver, the speaker argues for a radical solution, confronting the religious text itself. This could mean reinterpreting or reforming Islamic doctrine *, advocating for a reformation within Islam to de-emphasize political or militaristic interpretations of jihad. Historical attempts, like those of 19th century reformers, e.g., Muhammad Abduh, aimed to reconcile Islam with modernity, but these face resistance from traditionalists. Direct critique of the Quran *. The speaker's call to expose the Quran as a military manual suggests a public, critical examination of its texts, akin to secular critiques of religious scriptures. This is highly contentious, as it risks alienating moderate Muslims and fueling accusations of Islamophobia. Cultural or ideological confrontation *. Beyond military action, this implies a broader cultural or intellectual battle to challenge the appeal of political Islam, possibly through education, counter-narratives, or promoting secular governance. The speaker's point about fighting the same war over and over reflects a view that current strategies, targeting groups like #Hamas through military means, address symptoms, not causes. For example, after Hamas's rise in #Gaza, post-2006 elections, Israel's operations, e.g., Operation Cast-led, 2008-09, weakened its infrastructure but didn't eliminate its ideological appeal. Similarly, the PA, despite cooperating with Israel on security, faces criticism for not countering anti-Israel narratives rooted in religious rhetoric. Counterpoints and challenges. 1. Oversimplification of ideology *. Critics might argue that tying all violence to political Islam ignores other factors, socio-economic conditions, political disenfranchisement, or historical grievances. For instance, the #Israeli-Palestinian conflict is fueled by land disputes, occupation, and national identity as much as by religious ideology. Groups like the PA are often secular nationalist, not purely Islamist, complicating the narrative. 2. Diverse interpretations of Islam *. The Quran is not a monolith. Islamic scholars across history, e.g., Al-Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, and modern contexts interpret jihad differently. Mainstream Muslims often reject the militant readings favored by groups like Hamas or ISIS. Painting the Quran itself as the problem risks alienating the broader Muslim world, including allies in counterterrorism. 3. Practicality of confronting the playbook ***. Directly challenging the Quran or Islam's political doctrine is fraught with peril. It could inflame tensions, radicalize moderates, and undermine diplomatic efforts. For example, Western critiques of Islam, e.g., post-9/11, have sometimes bolstered extremist narratives by framing the conflict as a clash of civilizations. 4. Alternative approaches *. Some argue that addressing root causes, poverty, education, governance, would weaken the appeal of militant ideologies. Programs like Saudi Arabia's de-radicalization initiatives focus on rehabilitation and counter-narratives rather than attacking religious texts directly. Real-world context. The speaker's view aligns with a broader debate on how to address Islamist militancy. Data from conflict zones supports the idea that ideology persists despite military setbacks. Hamas and Gaza *. Despite repeated Israeli operations, Hamas's support in Gaza fluctuates but endures, partly due to its religious framing of resistance. Polls, e.g., Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, 2024, show mixed support for Hamas, often tied to despair over peace prospects. ISIS and Al-Qaeda *. After ISIS's territorial defeat in 2019, its ideology persisted, spawning affiliates in Africa and Asia. Al-Qaeda's resilience post-Bin Laden shows how ideological networks outlive their leaders. Iran's role *. The speaker doesn't mention state actors, but Iran's support for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, rooted in its own Shia Islamist ideology, complicates the picture. This suggests external political agendas also sustain these groups, not just the Quran. Conclusion. The argument frames political Islam, and specifically the Quran's jihad doctrine, as the enduring driver of groups like Hamas. It calls for confronting this ideology head-on, rather than just targeting its manifestations. While this perspective highlights a real challenge, the resilience of religiously motivated militancy, it risks oversimplifying a complex issue and alienating potential allies. Addressing the playbook would require a nuanced approach, combining military, cultural, and diplomatic strategies while respecting the diversity of Islamic thought. Without this balance, the cycle of conflict may indeed persist, as the speaker warns, under new flags but with the same ideological fuel. Thanks.
Thanks again.